All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and officially get started. My name is Tyler Ashworth, and I am the president for the Hampton Roads Association of Christian Schools, or quickly known as HRACS. It's been my privilege to serve in this position for about a year now, and been working hard to bring forward a quality professional development opportunity. I'm so grateful for the people at Regent who are helping us put this together in a COVID world and using technology to make this happen. And I know everyone has been very busy trying to figure out how to educate in a COVID atmosphere. So I'm so appreciative of your time. I see we have about 80 participants. I'm hopeful that more will join us as we get going here, but this is a good crowd, and so grateful to be learning alongside of you. So let's start with a quick word of prayer, and then I will hand it over to our presenters. All right, let's pray. Jesus, we thank you for this afternoon. I thank you so much for every Christian educator that is on this training, that's on this Zoom call. Thank you, God, first and foremost, for your love and allowing us to do something like this and creating the means. I thank you for the partnership from Regent and how they care to invest in Christian schools to further their mission as well. God, we're all in this for you. We want to build your kingdom. We want to do what is right by our students and give them the best possible education that we can. So God, to do this, we must be humble. We must be eager. Must have a growth mindset. And Lord, I ask that you would just open up our minds, our ears, and our hearts to learn and to grow. Let us be encouraged by this information. I ask that you bless every presenter. Thank you for the time that they put into this. And Lord, let us walk out of this afternoon's time together encouraged and better off for it. And we thank you for all this. In your name, Jesus, we pray. Amen. All right. So before we officially get started, Dr. Kressig is going to have a few words, but I want to introduce him. He has been, as I said in some of my email communications, just instrumental. He's been my point person that I've been working with at Regent University, and he really put this team together and helped make all this happen. And he's just been such a great partner and a delight to work with. So I really want to thank him in front of everybody. He has just been tremendous. And if you don't know him and his position, from reading up on him on his bio, he's been a part of Regent University since 2013. And in 2018, he became the dean for the School of Education. So Dr. Kress, thank you so much. And I'll now turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Tyler. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to spend this afternoon with you. And I'm excited about today. We have 5 professional educators who are going to talk to us about social emotional learning and best practices pedagogy. They're going to help us better understand our students and really better meet the needs of students. In fact, all students across Hampton Roads. So I'm excited for this. Our agenda for today, let me go to the next screen here. Roughly, this give or take 10, 15 minutes here. 3:30 to 4:30, I'm going to do some introductions of our presenters, give an overview of the webinar. From 3:40 to 4:15, Drs. Bonk and Callahan are going to talk about social emotional learning. 4:15 to 4:50, Drs. Dracinos, Fuge, and Mr. Lewis are going to talk about best practices pedagogy. And we'll have a Q&A session at the end, about 4:50 to 5 o'clock, give or take. And this presentation is being recorded, just so you know. Some housekeeping things. Again, if you're having trouble hearing us, just adjust your volume, whether you're in a mobile or iPad or office computer. You can submit questions to the Q&A at any time during the presentation, but we're not going to answer any Q&A until the end of all the presentations, right around that 4:50 mark, 4:45. The chat feature is open, so all the attendees can chat among themselves, send messages back and forth. That will remain open, so you can do that at any time. But let's go ahead and get started. Let me go ahead and introduce our first 2 panelists that are going to talk about social emotional learning. On my left there, Dr. Ivy Bonk came to us in 2008 as a Christian school principal, and she questioned the systematic injustice of misdiagnosing children with unaddressed trauma with special needs and learning disabilities. She left equipped and ready to innovate solutions and challenge the status quo. She holds a specialty certification in neurosequentialing modeling in education from the Child Trauma Academy. She also serves as the core SEL team for the state of Delaware. She's the founder of Every Child Whole, an educational service organization providing consulting and training to school divisions and districts around the nation. Dr. Callahan received his master's degree from us in 1986, and that began a 30-year career as a professional counselor. Working with individuals and families in both private practice and inpatient hospital settings, he studied the needs of children and the impact dysfunctional family systems have on their growth and development. His research focus has been the neurological impact of emotional trauma and its effect on academic performance. A key element to his research uncovered the viability of creating a relational learning environment within the classroom, which would impact the learning ability of children who have experienced early life stress. Let me introduce our pedagogy presenters. On my left, Dr. Karen Dracinos earned her doctorate in educational psychology from Regent. She's nationally board certified in early childhood education, and she's been honored with numerous teaching awards, including Virginia's Regional Teacher of the Year in 2011, Virginia Lottery 2013 Super Teacher, and in 2013, again, Outstanding Teacher Award by Penn State University's Alumni Association. Throughout her doctoral work, Karen's presented at numerous professional conferences. On the right-hand side, Dr. Deb Fuge. She grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Her research focus at Regent University was the student-led conference. During the 2020 year, Deborah worked with WHRO Public Television on a 2-season series called Learn and Grow with HRO. Many of you maybe saw that. That series provided instruction to children across the state during our pandemic. She's been recognized as your school's 2022 Teacher of the Year. Deborah recently was featured in Regent Stories as she's been tagged by the superintendent, and she's also received the Great Dreams Need Great Teachers Award. And currently she's working on another project with WHRO. She's writing the curriculum for a new educational environmental van. And finally, our last presenter is Mr. Mike Lewis. He's not only a husband and father of 4 awesome girls ranging from kindergarten to senior in high school, and boy, tell me he's not busy with that. But Mike started as a youth and young families pastor for 15 years, and that actually prepared him to be a compassionate and energetic teacher in the classroom. He holds a master's degree in special education from Regent University, and he's currently a doctoral student pursuing educational leadership at Regent. Mike is a regular speaker at the Virginia Beach Digital Learning Summit and is a regular contributor to the professional development of all Virginia Beach City teachers in the 4th grade virtual learning center. So we've got a lot of expertise coming together in this room, and I look forward to this. Let me see if there's anything else I need to cover here before we begin. I think that is it. I'm going to turn this over. Dr. Bonk, Dr. Callahan, I'll turn the floor to you.
Good afternoon. So now, Kurt, are you managing the PowerPoint or?
I will.
Oh, you do? Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name's, like you said, my name's Dr. Ivy.
Good afternoon, everyone. Dr. Callahan.
Okay, let's go, Kurt. Okay, the objectives for our workshop today, we only have like 35 minutes, like Dr. Crescent said. So we want to, I don't know where my first one went, but we're going to talk about we mentioned SEL, some of the common language and definitions around that. I think our first objective went away, and then move into identifying roadblocks to SEL implementation, and then explore some strategies. So, go ahead. Now, a lot of this work, I'm not sure if you're familiar, but this work started actually back in 1996, Yale University, and it was the focus of the work was around emotional intelligence. And then it moved to the University of Illinois, where they coined the terminology social and emotional learning. And a lot of the resources that I know in public education, because that's usually who I'm serving, come from an organization called CASTLE, Collaborative for academics and social and emotional learning. And their definition you see here on the screen, SEL is the process through which children and adults acquire and effectively apply the knowledge, attitudes, and skills necessary to understand and manage emotions. That's a lot, that's a mouthful right there, right? Set and achieve positive goals, feel and show empathy for others, and establish and maintain positive relationships and make decisions. And this is the wheel that they typically use. And I was sharing the other day, thank you. I was sharing the other day, I get pushback sometimes from Kingdom educators because concerned about, what are we bringing into the schools? But Holy Spirit reminded me this morning about a verse I had thought about sharing with you the other day. And so I heard it again this morning. I just took that as confirmation. But John 1:5, where it says, God created everything, and there's nothing that has been created that can be created. So just know, this is the way I look at it, that everything originated from him. So anything, this is all good. We're all about redeeming. So we're not about judging, and obviously we're going to be cautious and use wisdom and this sort of thing. But all these things we can find origin for actually in the Word of God, in the truth of God. It's just our application. And so I would they have 4 rings around their, like the context and the application. You see the 4 rings around their wheel. I would even add another ring if I was going to update this and have under classrooms, we'd have self, right? Because that's where it all begins with us. And then maybe at the bottom, it would say relationally responsive. And so that's what Dr. C is going to get ready to, okay, I'm sorry. I'm missing my next slide. Go ahead to the next slide again now, Kurt. I'm sorry. And these are just some of so we talked about, so basically SEL is our skill set for understanding and managing emotions. And so the bullets around the perimeter of the wheel is just some of those skills that we talk about, some of the competencies. So these are the 5 core competency areas that Castle talks about, and then the different skill sets associated with the competency areas. So now we're going to talk, Dr. C is going to talk about some of the roadblocks that can prevent you from being successful at communicating this. And then we'll come back and talk about how to embed some of this into the instruction and classroom.
Make sure that you can hear me good. Okay, everything's cool. Thank you, Dr. Kressig, and thank you, Tyler, for letting me be a part of this wonderful opportunity. So if you'll go to the next slide, please. I began looking at, in my dissertation, do teachers really know what's going on with kids? And the SEL model is great framework, and it gives us a great language, and it tells us how we can, make the words for it and put all this together. But there's a piece that we're missing prior to that. Right. And that's the alarm system that's within the brain. So imagine, if you will, there's a bear at your door, and you see the bear, and instantly in your brain, within milliseconds, the brain goes, okay, do I fight the bear? Do I run away? Or do I curl up in a ball? Fight, flight, or freeze. When that happens, your brain overproduces cortisol. It's called the stress hormone. And when that happens, your blood pressure increases, your sugar level increases, your adrenaline increases, heart rate, all those things, because you're getting ready for the fight if you need it. And what I have done in my research is looking at what happens when children are raised in this kind of toxic environment. Yes, SEL is important, and yes, it's a great framework, but let's back up just for a second. If Johnny comes to 6th grade and he's coming from, which go to the next slide. Next slide, please. If he comes from a home where it's toxic stress 24/7, there's physical abuse or sexual abuse or abandonment or poor nutrition or drug addiction or mentally ill parents or whatever tag you want to put on it. Johnny lives in this 24/7. So every moment there's a perceived bear at the door. And every moment he's overproducing cortisol in his brain. And every moment that brain is now stuck, if you will, in a state of hyper alert. So he comes to your class and you want Johnny to sit down and be good and be happy and do the work and stay focused and make friends and not get in trouble. And he's going, how am I supposed to do that? Because his brain is on such hyper alert. When these kids come into the classroom, they don't have a sense of, okay, I'm this way at home and I'm going to be this way at school, which is better. They have very limited ability in making friends, controlling their behavior, making good decisions. They don't operate on reward-based behavior. They don't like group activities. there's a whole profile for these students that a lot of times teachers will see a student who has issues and immediately say, this student has a learning disability, when in reality, they are a stress brain child manifesting like stress brains do. And with that HPA axis, that's the hippocampus, pituitary, and adrenal gland, when that axis is kicked on and that cortisol is being produced, next slide, please. Back up. It's kind of like living in front of a fire hydrant. Okay, this is what Johnny comes to your class from a neurological standpoint. This is the picture of him, because here's what happens. When these kids come to class, they're not in a place where they can just turn this off because it's been on for so long. Plus, if you look at different personalities, there's a good chance that somebody in that class or the teacher may act kind of like mom or dad, which is going to push all those buttons all over again. So now we've got his brain dumping cortisol, and we've got him going, okay, now just sit still and be good. Focus on your work. It's going to be okay. You can do this. And that's the opposite they do. And they don't understand how to regulate because it's not being regulated inside their brain. They can't regulate their behavior when their brain's going haywire because of all the cortisol being dumped. It's amazing when I talk to teachers and I ask them, do you have Johnny in your class? They all raise their hand. They've all got 5 or 10 Johnnies that they go, wait, he doesn't have ADD? He doesn't have ADHD? Wait a minute. Could I get him just to look at the emotions? I think one of the mistakes we make is we want to say, let's use mindfulness or let's use whatever. But if we don't address how to turn off that cortisol dump, we're not going to get very far. So there is a magic bullet, and I'm going to take just a couple minutes and share that magic bullet with you. So when I was doing my dissertation, I began doing a lot of work and a lot of research on the neurological side of trauma and what's going on in the brain. But the counselor side of me said, is there a way to fix this? There's got to be a way to fix or turn this cortisol dump off. And I knew that in the counseling world, attachment has something to do with making connections and what's going on. So the first question I wanted to ask was, what happens in the brain when there's an attachment? Does it do anything in the brain? Now think next slide if you want. Okay, we're going to come back to that one in a second. Go to the next one. Okay, so biblically, Genesis, Bible says it's not good for man to be alone. Aloneness is a state of mind. So in my work, I was looking at, okay, what happens in the brain if there's an attachment or a connection? And I found out that during those moments of attachment, your brain actually releases oxytocin. For instance, if you find your most favorite chocolate bar, or the person you love gives you a hug, or when you're worshiping God, or when you're connecting with somebody, you feel something. That feeling is the release of oxytocin. It's that feel-good hormone. So then I wanted to find out, okay, do oxytocin and cortisol live at the same time in the same brain? The answer is no. So if my goal as a teacher is to get Johnny's brain to relax, now what I have to create is oxytocin moments or attachment moments or relational learning moments so that I can help calm his environment in his brain. Now we have the magic bullet. So if I'm a teacher and I've got a stress brain child in my classroom, if I understand the importance of relational learning and I develop a relationship with him, because Johnny, he's not going to tell you today, I need attention, Mrs. Smith. He's not going to tell you I'm feeling bad. He's going to act out. It's kind of like a tennis match. He's going to serve over to you in your court with disruption, problems, anxiety, yelling, whatever. That's his volley over. And what he's trying to see is, are you going to respond to me, or are you going to do what everyone else always does? So it's easy for them to get on your last nerve. So then you respond back with an attachment moment, and he goes, oh, you're safe. And his brain relaxes for a split second because there's an oxytocin moment. Now, more and more and more oxytocin moments begin to happen. And guess what? The neural pathways in the brain begin to change because the brain operates on a use it or lose it principle. If you use things it strengthens neural pathways. If you don't use things, it's called pruning, those pathways are turned off, if you will. For instance, remember when you first drove a car at age 15 or 16, your first day with your license, you've got your hands on the steering wheel, 10 and 2. You are focused, you're hyper-focused. You don't want to talk to anybody in the car. You don't want anybody having food. You're not eating food. You're not playing the radio. You are hyper-focused on the moment of driving. And then, now 20 years fast forward, you get in your car, you can do your makeup if you're a lady, you can drink coffee, you can have a conversation, you can be on your Bluetooth and have the music going. What's the difference? You've created a longer, strengthened pathway called driving. Now it becomes automatic. So the brain operates on a use it or lose it principle. Experiences strengthen those neural pathways. So Johnny, who's come to your class, oxytocin moments, guess what? You are now stopping the cortisol production and you are giving him oxytocin attachment moments. And now, because of that, you can start implementing some of these SEL constructs that now take hold and take root. And it's amazing how that works. Next slide. So the brain overproduces cortisol. Even when the stress is removed, research shows that that cortisol still is produced. It doesn't stop just because the stress goes away. It's still being produced, which is why you have to produce the oxytocin moments, because oxytocin overcomes cortisol. Students who fit this profile, they don't understand new trauma, they can't regulate their emotions, and actually asking a child who's coming from a stress brain perspective to sit quietly in class, do your academic performance, make your friendships, and control your behavior, where it's like asking someone to run a marathon who just lost their legs. They may have the desire and the want to, but they do not have the tools to do it at that moment. Attachment releases oxytocin. It's not present at the same time. Now you're into relational learning and providing that environment for students to thrive. I think one more slide. We have one more. Okay. So educators who can implement this, the lost child can be found. Dr. Ivy, would you now go back? Because I know the lost child is.
Yeah, I don't need this. I don't need you to go back, Kurt. I know the slide, so you don't have to scroll back and then back again. So what Dr. C is referencing, because when I was in my intro, I was a principal at a school and children were being referred for special needs testing. And one day I'm looking, looking over a referral, and the Holy Spirit just dropped in my spirit. Am I looking at a true learning disability, or am I looking at symptoms from childhood trauma? And so 2 weeks later, I was at Regent uncovering the answers, and not until, because actually trauma is in my history. And so this is just all my work as part of God redeeming my story. But so I'm almost to the end of this journey, and I'm in a hotel room on Virginia Beach, and it's almost like the words lifted up off the page. And he told me it's called The Lost, because I was trying to think, God, what is the end game here? I wasn't understanding where we were going. And he said, it's called the lost child theory. And what happens is when a child experiences trauma in childhood, they're robbed of the experience of now. So they can't be in the present. So it's part of that, the reactive thing that Paul was talking about. So they're running for cover. So when this happens, they lose 3 critical attributes. They lose support. That's the attachment. That's all about another way of what Paul was talking about. He's talking about what's going on physiologically. I'm talking conceptually. So, but it's the attachment issue. So they lose their support. They lose the script. So life, this frame around their life that kind of had things make sense, is gone. And so that's where the cause and effect thing comes in. They lose all sense of cause and effect because they're waiting for the next shoe to drop. So you have lost support, lost script, and these things, the enemy uses them to kind of scaffold on one another, right? To set up for the loss. The third one is a lost sense of self. And so that's the identity issue, right? And so doing this work with SEL, I'm like, how can we, because, when I went to Regent, we weren't really talking about this. By the time I came out, it started to be something everybody was talking about. Then I get involved in the SEL work, and that's why this might seem out of whack here, but it's so very important, because like Paul was saying, how can we ask these children to perform these, and even you as educators, to have asked kids to perform on these SEL competencies when we haven't addressed the origins. And Christian school, I was in a Christian school when this was when I was, having these experiences. So I know sometimes families come to Christian schools not because they're gung-ho in the kingdom. They may be just trying to protect their child from public education, what they consider public education, So anyway, so we thought it was important to mention these roadblocks, because again, if you can't understand the origins, we're going to be hard put to be able to determine any outcomes. So I hope that makes sense.
Yep. Is there another slide next? What's next? All right.
Yeah.
Keep going. So the first thing we're talking about really is, and one of the parts of my research has been to look at what do teachers actually know. I was pretty amazed, found out pretty much across the board that most teachers either do not attend at least one conference or have a course in their education journey to become teachers to understand really what early life stress is all about, or what the student profile is about, and how you really can look at. One of the things that I did was actually create a quiz for educators, and the highest score on my quiz was a 58 out of 100, which means that they didn't have the knowledge that they thought they did. However, about 96% of them said, I've got kids like this in my class. And so there's a need to get the knowledge of what this looks like and how you can identify this in your class. Second of all, purpose to build a relational learning environment. So let me go here. Dr. Kressig has heard me do this. So I'll ask everyone just to think about for a second, in your life, from the time you're in kindergarten, even all the way through college, how many professors or teachers can you say, I still remember their name, I felt connected to them, I was attached to them, I loved their class, I excelled in their class because they believed in me? I've been asking this same question now for 11 years, and usually I'll get, everybody can find one. Some people can find 3. Remember 3. The most I've ever had, I believe, is 5, maybe one number 7 on the years, but typically no one's ever gotten to 10. But yet from kindergarten through into college, we may have as many as 100 to 150 different teachers in our life. And not even 10% are teachers that I would say created a relational learning environment in that class where you attached and bonded to. Mm-hmm. So then the question becomes this: would you be any different if you'd had 50% of those teachers fall in that category, 75%, or even 100%? Could you imagine what would happen to a child who's got a stressed brain, that all the teachers from kindergarten through 12th grade understood his profile, understood his brain, and could work with him? Let me throw this out here. Kids who experience chronic toxic stress, they're more likely to end up in prison, develop drug addictions, or develop adult psychiatric disorders. But changing the neural pathways, you can change the trajectory of where that child's going to end up, because you've built a relationship in that classroom, and be able to do specific protocols only for these kids. Like, for instance, a lot of my students will, if I give them an assignment on what do you think protocols will work in the classroom, number one thing they'll say is group activity. Kids love groups. That's true. These kids hate groups. They do not thrive in a group setting at all. They hate it. So there's specific learning protocols that you need to learn to deal with these kids. All right, next slide. All right,
yep.
Dr. Bonk.
Yep. That's me. Okay, let me go back and just recap real quick on the slide where I had created this new organization of the core competencies. Because again, like I said, I oftentimes from Christian educators can get pushback on the whole, idea of SEL. But I think my core value is justice, and I love, I can't tell you how much I love interrupting the enemy's plans. So if he had any, we definitely want to, in this area, we want to interrupt them. So based on everything that Paul was sharing about, building relationship, we're talking about building healthy attachment so we can have kids that are ready to receive the instruction and, perform in these, healthy ways. Then what if we came up with a model, SEL in the kingdom, SEL-K, we can call it, right? And so everything, so that that slide there was to communicate that as kingdom educators, we can shift it around. And then we know, because God is all about relationship. That's why he sent his son, right? To reconcile back to us. So if we can operate out of the what's the word I'm looking for? But you know what I'm trying to say. We operate from that. Everything flows from that core competency, to use their language. So everything's operating and flowing from relationship, and all those other things are going to come out of that. So that's why, again, the important part of keeping student centric, and then always keep ourselves in check, because the theory that God gave me, the lost child theory, I ended up writing my story. He had me at the end of last year write my story. So it's called Lost: Finding My Way Back to a Place I've Never Been. Because as adults, if these are things that Paul is sharing about happen to us in childhood, and there's got to be people on here, many of you, I have just know because of, that's the statistics, right, have experienced some kind of trauma. And so we can even be, as adults, as teachers in the classroom, have stuff that we need to address, that we need to look at, so we're able to do. So it's all about that relationship, us with him, and then us with the students, and back and forth, so we can model that out. And so we said we're going to talk about embedding these SEL competencies in the classroom. And now I gave Dr. Cressing a whole list of resources, and I think he was going to pass it on to Tyler, that you can have. There's so much out there as on, how to do SEL and that type of thing. So, but this is just an example from one source called Engaging Schools. And so this, you have your learning domain. So this question here under personal relationships: how do teachers foster and sustain strong and supportive personal relationships, in support of caring for themselves and each other? And so they're just giving you, and so this is what you're getting ready to talk about or hear from the other presenters: the pedagogy, the daily instructional practices. So this is, I thought, heard God tell me this morning, he wanted me to tell you not to make this too difficult, right? He said, what we hear in scripture, Jesus came to fulfill the law. So let's apply it here as well, and don't make this over difficult. But I think we can think of SEL. This is how I heard it. Think of SEL as your way of being as you're learning. So this is our way of being as we're learning. Again, we could take all those skill sets that were on slide 2, all the different, identifying emotions, whatever all they were, and attach them to some biblical scriptural truth if we need be. And so anyway, and another way to even embed that and to help you is, because students should be your co-learning partners, is to be able to give those out, even if you're going to start using these. I don't know what your plan is to implement and integrate SEL, but you could even partner with your students this way, and they could have even a daily or a weekly goal of, how are you, I'm going to partner with you today. And so you could pick one skill set, and they could tell you how they were going to partner with you today in that specific skill set. But so there's ways, so as you're doing, so it's a lot of the time. Also, another thing I wanted to point out is a lot of time when we're doing this, because we have so many things coming down the pike, these initiatives, this, that, and something else, again, especially in public education, and we can become very fragmented and siloed in our thinking. So that's why I'm saying, kind of look at it, that it all connects, because it does. So as you're, practicing these different pedagogies, you can realize you're actually, kids are working together in pairs or in groups. So you can be observing, are they being, self-aware of each other, how they're expressing themselves, their emotions to each other, how these type of things. So you can go to the next one if you want, Kurt. And again, these are just different examples of how you can use these in the classroom. What's that? It's planning challenging, meaningful learning tasks. So again, if we're talking again about students who have a difficult time in exercising their voice, giving them opportunity, and those align with the things right there in the third column there, their ability to communicate effectively, demonstrate social and civic responsibility, these kind of things. I had this other thought too, because a lot of times just to, and it ties in with the competencies, and what Paul's bringing out is like them being hesitant if they have experienced, and let's face it, today, we just went through COVID or going through COVID. Everybody's experienced trauma. But I just had thought of this today. I came up with this little thing, and this would be more for the elementary class, right? Can you see? So I made you see my thing is slides. So this could be your rubric or your emotional rubric, or even if you're picking a certain competency area that you're focused on, you can make whatever. And so that they could have it on their desk. Again, this would be elementary school thing. And so they could tell you, they don't even have to say anything. They can just leave it on their desk, but they can tell you where they are on any given day, And so and asking some of these, this is creating self-awareness, social awareness. And you could even ask questions like, so they're going to be here. And so you're asking the question, what do you need me to know? Or, what can I do for you? Paul probably be a lot better at this since he's a counselor. Yeah. So, but yeah, giving them opportunity in different ways to express, if they're having trouble exercising their voice. Let's see what the next example. So yeah, you're doing all this stuff all the time. I think a large part of it is just thinking about like we say, think about what you're thinking about, think about what you're doing, because a lot of this stuff you're already integrating. I think a lot of the time it's just about stopping long enough to articulate what it is you're doing, because I'm sure if you sat down with what you do every day, you could go through these competencies and align. So it's not about having another SEL, having a separate class. A lot of, schools do the have a separate class meeting period for doing social emotional learning, but I don't recommend that. I think it's much better when you find ways to integrate. And so this whole document, this resource here is in the takeaways that I sent to Kurt and Tyler. So you'll have those to be able to go and kind of, again, because and if you go to the Castle website, there is loads and loads and loads. Oh, there you go. And so for these folks engaging schools, important to them is the whole, there's a lot of talk around being culturally responsive, restorative, focus on the equity issue. For me, equity is about the opportunity to be fully you. And so, yeah, so if this is something that you're looking at, again, these are just examples. I don't need to read them to you on how you could integrate and correlate those things in the classroom. All right.
Let me just throw, before we go to the next one, let me just kind of pull it all together and leave you guys with a couple points. Number one, we are talking about attachment in the classroom, and I encourage teachers to look at their own attachment history, or what's called an attachment scheme. Basically, the kid that gets on your last nerve in your class probably reminds you of somebody that you may not get along with, and you need to deal with your own stuff sometimes. That happens every day. But the three things I want to leave with you. Number one, if the perceived bear is at the door, it doesn't have to be the bear is actually at the door, but if the child perceives the bear is at the door, the alarm system will still kick in. So in situations where that child sees a group activity, a presentation, an assignment or whatever, if that's a perceived bear, that stress level kicks into that child in that brain. And you have to deal with that as an educator. 2, oxytocin reduces cortisol expression. That's gospel truth. It absolutely does. So here's the money shot. Everybody, when you hear this, they go, well, I've got too much going on with curriculum and all the stuff I got to do. How am I going to create attachment moments? Minimal oxytocin moments have a great effect on a child's brain. Whether that's a simple hand on a shoulder, an eye contact, a simple touch, a simple "you've done great." The greater the compliment, the greater the oxytocin that's coming out. And anybody can take 30 seconds a day for every child and say, here, let me connect with you at this level for a second, because I'm going to release something purposely in your brain and make a change. So that's kind of the summary of all this. And on that note, I'll turn it back to Dr. Kresick.
Awesome job. Hey, Drs. Bonk and Callahan, just listening to you right now, even for myself, helped me center that, there's a connection between that theory and the practice that we do every day, many of us, but we don't stop and think about it. Like Dr. Ivy said, that there's a reason why we learn these things, whether it be a morning meeting or something to engage the students or do some collaborative learning.
Right.
It's all about SEL. So I appreciate your expertise. Thank you so much. We have some questions at the end of the whole presentation that have come up, and I'll reach back out to both of you. Let me see. I'm going to turn this over now. We now have best practice pedagogy for today's classroom with Dr. Dracinos, Fuge, and Mr. Lewis. And we're going to start with Dr. Dracinos.
Hi, everybody. We're so happy to be able to share some of our passions and knowledge with you today. I'm Dr. Karen Dracinos. I am an educator for, 20 some years, have been working in central office in Virginia Beach City Public Schools as our early education instructional specialist. And I am currently an assistant principal at Diamond Springs Elementary School. So some of the things that we are going to share with you today is really going to kind of bridge the theory to practice that Dr. Ivy and Dr. Callahan shared with you. So we're going to try to show you some ways that you can embed these best practices into what you already are doing that's successful in the classroom, okay? So we're gonna get started with small group learning. And I love this because it's exactly what Dr. Ivy was even mentioning and Dr. C as well. This cannot happen without explicit instruction. And we know that when students work together and they collaborate with their peers, the learning increases. And we just talked about the data and the research behind why that's so important, right? So the attachment is important to adults, but attachment from peer to peer is just as important. So we're gonna go through some different strategies that you might use in the classroom to enhance the opportunities for your students to work in small group as they learn. All right, so we'll go to the next slide. So the first thing we're going to talk about is what that small group learning looks like as it's teacher-led. So if you're thinking about having a class of 20 some kids and meeting the needs of all of those kids emotionally and cognitively with your academic skills, it's going to be very hard because students are at differing levels, right? And it's hard to provide immediate feedback to those students when you're teaching many of your content areas in whole group instruction. So what we want to do is really target the effectiveness of student need. So what it is your students need, what goals are for their growth, towards mastery of an objective. And when I mention mastery of objective, I'm really speaking about any core content skill that you might be teaching in any particular moment. So that's the purpose of a teacher-led small group instruction. The duration would be daily. So think of your objective that you're teaching and think of how you might break it down into different chunks for different students in different ability levels. Okay, so of course this is going to be in core content and core subjects. Most popular, literacy and math, right? Because those are our foundational skills and our foundational content. And where are you going to do this? In the classroom. It happens in the learning environment. It becomes accustomed to the learning environment as well. So a very simple way that you might organize your small group instruction or your small group learning is 3 groups or 4 groups. I always like 4 groups so you can really get to a smaller group with kids. But you might think of 3 groups and you might think of the way that you're going to group students, okay? So that first group, group 1, those are going to be your students that perform above mastery of the objective. So from the get-go, you're going to give a pre-assessment and already there's a group of kids who probably can teach you a little bit about that objective, right? They're above mastery. So they might be bored with just the basic knowledge of that objective. Your job is to increase their engagement and to increase their enrichment in that objective. So there's a group of kids. Then you may have another group in your classroom that you give that pre-assessment to. They are developing that skill towards the objective. They've got some prerequisite skills, still need to kind of teach them a little bit more for mastery of that objective. Those are the groups of kids that are right there at that curriculum level. So whatever resource you're using to teach that objective, they're kind of ready for you to teach that to them. They've got a little bit of the prerequisites and a little bit of stuff to learn, okay? And then you've got another group of kids. These are the kids who lack the prerequisite skills to learn an objective. So for example, if you're teaching, and I'm going to go very early education primary example here, if you're teaching teen numbers, for example, this group may not have even mastered numbers to 10 yet. So could you imagine if you gave them a task for teen numbers and they don't have the prerequisite skills, right? So you're going to need to tailor their instruction to learn that objective. You may need to give them extra support in order to even move to the objective in learning, okay? So it really does provide that tailoring opportunity, tailoring those objectives to meet the learning needs of your students. By doing that, you're able to be in a small group, you're able to provide immediate feedback, and you're able to build relationships and trust with students. It's really hard to do it with the class of 20. It's more natural to do it with a group of children every day that's predictable to them. And you are there fostering that learning and that social emotional connection with you. So we'll go to the next slide and I'll show you some examples. Okay, these are just two pictures of what that might look like. And those two pictures kind of, I want you to remember or think about two different things with this. So with small group direct teaching, it is flexible management and it is physical organization. So your management needs to be flexible, right? Because kids are going to develop at different levels. So you want to think of a way where kids might be in one group and then you move them to another group depending on what you're teaching them. And then the physical organization of the classroom. Let's set up a small group instructional space where kids it's predictable. They know that when they're there, they're going to get your attention to their academic and cognitive needs. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Oh, there we go. So we've got that teacher-directed small group learning. Now let's talk about the peer collaborative learning. So that will look like what kids are doing in the classroom when they're working together. And I love that Dr. Ivy had specifically pointed that out with the CASEL competencies in social emotional learning. So what is that really? Approximately 3 or 4 students working on one task together. Each student in the group will assume a role. And we increase students' communication skills, social emotional learning, teamwork, and sense of community. This is a learned behavior. So these must be taught and modeled. But one thing that I really have found very helpful as a classroom teacher and as an administrator is to create some group goals. So this is just a picture of an example of what those group goals would be. So when you're working collaboratively with others, you have 4 things you want to focus on: solving problems, asking for help if needed, staying on the task, and respecting peers. These goals can be attained from pre-K to 5th, 6th, 7th grade. Of course, you might want to tweak the language a little bit for the upper grades, okay? So let's take a look at what that might look like a little bit more in detail with some pictures. We're going to go to the next slide. This is an example of what those roles and responsibilities will be when they're working on a task. So for your peer collaboration groups, for 3 or 4 students, you may have a reporter, somebody who's going to report out the task to you or to other students. You're going to have a recorder. That is somebody who is going to be able to record their learning, whether it is writing something, videoing something with technology, doing Flipgrid, doing some of the things that my colleagues will share with you, some different resources, or it could be just drawing. It could be very, very simple, but there's an accountability factor of that teamwork and collaboration in a collaborative learning group. Then you've got the manager. All kids love to be the manager, and that's kind of how things go. And they like to make things, you know, they're kind of like the in-charge leader. Make sure you rotate that job because everybody does need to have those leadership skills. And then I always like to throw in tech support because you should be integrating those technological abilities with some of our tools. So tech support, if you're using Chromebook, maybe that's a person there who's going to queue up the Flipgrid for your students to go ahead and share out how they solve the problem in their peer group. All right, so there's a little bit of what that might look like. And I'm going to touch on one more thing before I pass it off to my colleague, Dr. Fuge, and that is task cards. So that'll be on the next slide. So we have teacher-directed, small group learning. We have purposeful opportunities for students to work in peer collaboration groups. Now we're going to spread our wings a little bit and challenge students to go above and beyond cross-curricular and work together to solve problems, which we would call task cards. So again, this is an opportunity for independent, if there are some students who want to work independently, or how I like to get them to work more collaboratively, so it could be partners or groups. You may organize these tasks by subject. Of course, you're going to differentiate them by abilities. And what they really do is promote student agency, because you're going to provide students with a challenge or a prompt, but how they answer the problem or the prompt is up to them. So that's what that product delivery looks like. Okay, they can make a video and show you a video of it. They can draw a picture and explain to you how they solved the problem. They can type something in a Google Doc. The product is going to be their choice. And there's power in that, because we can really tap into the gifts that our students have when you give them choices, okay, and agency. And of course, one of the things we need to do and embed, in addition to embedding social emotional learning, is embedding inquiry, wonder, and research, because those are 21st century skills that we really want to see students foster. So these are just two pictures of just very simple early elementary tasks. You may have a team one working together. You're giving them manipulatives and say, okay, I want you to build the tallest tower. See if you can use this talk card and tell me how you built it that way. Or we can build a bridge that can hold how many gummy bears, okay? And on the next page, or on the next slide, are some different examples of higher level task cards. So you can imagine that not only are these tasks curriculum focused or topic focused, but they're embedded in literacy, math, social emotional skills. So science, for example, think about a topic we learned in science, formulate a question. How will you show what you know? In literature, you can trade places with any character in a story that we have read. Choose the character and use your resources. Why would you choose to trade places with this character, right? Then we can go to the next slide. Math, how many ways can you make the numbers? It's open-ended, right? They're going to find many different ways, but you can tap into how it is that they're problem solving and utilizing what you've taught them as strategies to solve the problem. I always like to use your resources to explain your thinking. So there's agency there. Use a whiteboard, take a picture of what you've solved, paper, pencil, write it to me, do a Flipgrid or video. Social studies, you're having a pizza party. You can invite any historical figure that we've learned about. Who would you invite and why? And then how would you explain the year 2020 to them? Okay, last slide. Creativity, this is one I really love. And again, there's many out there on the internet, but I like to think of some of my own, because you would be able to know your curriculum the best, right? So you really wanted to embed in that curriculum. If you had a superpower that you can choose for me, and I've done this before as an assistant principal, and instead of teacher, I said, Dr. Dracinos, what would it be and why did you choose it? And let me tell you, they've got some really good ideas for superpowers. And then how would the superpower help me? And then the last thing is a challenge card. So this could be anything that students think of themselves. And so you might leave some empty challenge cards out when students can actually think of their own tasks and challenge their friends. This is a challenge that a fifth grader in one of our elementary schools wrote for their peers in another peer collaboration group. How many words can you use making the letters in your first and last name? And then how many words in 2 minutes can you make? And in 5 minutes and in 10 minutes. So there's a plethora of opportunities to really enhance students' abilities and practice the social emotional learning skills that we know are so important with the peer-to-peer collaboration. All right, and I'm going to pass it over to, I believe it's Dr. Fuge.
It is. Hello, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Dracinos. I'm so happy to be a part of this today. I am an elementary school teacher, and I have been in the classroom for 30 years, and mostly in first grade. I'm excited to present to you after Dr. Dracinos and her small group talk, because I'm going to discuss independent learning time. This is a time in the classroom that is usually a good chunk of the day. And it used to be for me very stressful because there was so much prep to it. It was prepping games, activities, copying papers. So some time ago, I decided to change it up, and I began giving my students a choice in their daily learning. And this really has made a huge difference in my classroom. And I'm looking forward to sharing it with you, and hopefully you will find the value in it as well. These activities that I'm going to share, I use daily with my first graders. It would look different with older children, but the same kind of concepts. Now, the biggest takeaway from this is that the children have choice. They will have choice in what they're doing, and that way they have a stake in it. They feel that they are deciding on what their learning is at that time, and you have the outline of what you want them to be learning, so that way they're still going in the right direction. They just get to choose when and what they do. So let me give you a little snapshot of how I transform my independent learning time. And if you go to the next slide, please. To begin, this is what it looks like in a first grade classroom in my room. The children have a supply basket. I use little plastic baskets from the Dollar Tree. Magazine boxes, we call book boxes, are another great thing to use, or recyclable or reusable shopping bags have been used too. And in this, the children keep all their supplies right with them. There's books in there that they've chosen that they're interested in reading. There's a composition book and notebooks to write in. You can see there's magnetic letters for when they're building words. If you have, if your children have computer access, or even if you have listening station type access, then you would have headphones or earbuds. And also some pens and pencils so that they have all the materials they need right with them all the time. In normal times, they would take their baskets and they could sit around the room wherever they like. But in these times, they keep them right at their seats. So if you could go to the next slide, please. This is an example of the anchor charts. These are some of the activities that the children are involved in every day. They include read to self, work on writing, listen to reading, word work. In normal times, they would also do read to someone. And since my children have computer access, they also have some computer choices. The important thing about these charts is that the children helped create them. I introduced these activities one at a time, starting with read to self, and we model it, and we talk about what it would look like, we practice it, and the children help write what their jobs are. And if you notice throughout all three of these charts, the students' jobs are pretty much the same. They're going to be staying in their spot, they're going to be working quietly, they'll be working the whole time, and they start working right away. And also, they help me with the teacher job, because I want them to understand while they have a job, I also have a job. And so while they're doing theirs, I do mine. And you can also notice that they have a lot of, they all say basically that I'm doing my job and working with children. So these are the beginning, and we practice one at a time, as I said, and we start to build stamina for them. The children love this word, stamina. We start, depending on your age level of your children, you might start with only 2 minutes. That's what I do in first grade. We practice for 2 minutes, and then we celebrate and we model and we say how easy the 2 minutes were. And then we might try one more time that day. And then the next day we would add a little bit more. And you just gradually add the time in until you get to your target time of what your small group would be working. And for me, that's about 20 minutes. So once we get to 20 minutes, we move on, and we've already added in some other ones of the choices, and then they're ready to roll. They're independent in their time. So this really, it pays off. The children love to be able to decide what they're doing when. And just to give you a little look into how they make their choices, if you go to the next slide, please. This is what it looks like in the classroom. The children each have a choice chart, And of course, since this is first grade, we have pictures to help them. And each day they put their choice chart out on their desk at the beginning of small group time and independent learning time. And I have the sheet to the right, with each of their names. They use their dry erase marker and they decide what their first choice is going to be. And then I go around, and the children that are not in small group, those children are already busy at the back table reading. They will tell me what they're going to do for each of their choices. And I track it this way just to make sure that everyone's doing each choice. In case you're wondering about the little ant, that's Smarty Ants. Our school system has access to that program. And the last one, the little monster, is Teacher Monster to Read. And this is an amazing free program if you're interested for your young learners. The children love this one, but Teacher Monster to Read is what that one is. So this is based off an awesome read. It's called The Daily Five. It's by Gail Boucher and Joe Moser. It's a short book, but it's packed full of ideas. And then you can just kind of adjust to what you want your children to be working on. But since it's literacy time, that's why you see all mine doing literacy-based activities. I wanted to take a few minutes to share another great resource with you. Next slide, please. This is called Seesaw. If you haven't used Seesaw, you really need, I strongly urge you to investigate it because it is an amazing resource, and you can create a free account. I just wanted to take you real quick and show you what it looks like in case you haven't seen it. Let me make sure this will work. And it looks like this, and you can set up your class, and the children can work on this independently once you get them accustomed to it, and they can do their own thing. They can take photos of their work, and then they can record themselves reading to it. They can take videos of themselves reading books. Or if they've done a project, I've used this for STEM projects where they will take a picture of what they've done and then explain what it is, and we have a little share time like this. There's so much to explore here. There's also activities for teachers. All you need to do is click, and there are tons of activities out here. You just put in what you're looking for, and they'll pop up, and you're ready to go. It's already made for you. If you want to make activities, you can, but otherwise you can pick from what's already there. So this is just go to seesaw.me. And that is where you can, that's where you can find yours. And I think I might have messed up the sharing. Dean Kresick, you might have to reshare your screen. Sorry about that. All right, so, but I really hope that you will take the opportunity to change up your independent learning time if you haven't already, or if you don't already do something like this. It truly gives the children a sense of responsibility, accountability, and independence. So, whoops. But I thank you very much for your time. And I'm going to pass it off to Mr. Mike Lewis to share. Thank you for your time.
Hey, everybody. So I get to jump in and give you guys a couple more really cool strategies and activities to do. Now, on my slide that's coming up next here, you're going to see it's going to talk about morning meeting. And this is really going to kind of pull it all in what we've been talking about, the social emotional learning and getting that level of oxytocin that the doctors were talking about to be injected in your students, this life force that counteracts some of that adverse childhood stuff that's happening out there. We really want to build these relationships, right? So this is what it's all about. And so in the morning meeting, what we try and do is we try and set up something every day where kids are interacting with each other, something funny is happening, you're building routines, you're strengthening those class relationships, but you're also giving a chance to gather some data for your small groups. So just like some of the others had talked about, small groups are really important to kind of like research your kids and find out where they are. And you can set up those different tiered levels of small groups, but you can also do it on the fly. And what's really cool about morning meeting is sometimes this is what I like to do. When I was teaching first, I used a chart like this, what's my neighbor? And if you notice there's a little shiny gleam across the top of it, that's because I laminated these. These are poster boards. I grabbed a yardstick and I just put out 10 columns and rows that let me put numbers on there. And then as the kids come in for the day, I give them a high five, or I guess now an elbow bump at the door we would do during COVID, and say, hey guys, go look at the board and do a what's my neighbor. And so what they would do is that you can see there's a 35 on there, there's a 66, and over on the right, there's a 50. And so they are responsible for filling in one of those numbers, either above or below. So above the 50, you would have put a 40. Below the 50, you would have put a 60. Right before to the left, you would have put 49, right? 35, same kind of thing. You're getting the point. They would do one above or one below or to the side. And then everybody, that's the first thing they do. Before they unpack, they just go right to whatever the board of the day is. And then at morning meeting, once the bell rings and we do the pledge or whatever the routine is for the morning, we gather all the kids together on the carpet. We do some things for a morning meeting, and part of the routine in the morning meeting would be, okay, let's take a look at this board and let's see how we did. So in this case, I would know who it is because the kids also would put like their number or initials or something next to it. And if they're struggling with it, then that's something quick I can say, small group, I can fix this today, hopefully, right? Also, if you can go to the next slide, you're going to see on there a couple more chances for morning meeting boards. This is the what's next, the blue one over here. And there's square, square, triangle, square, square, triangle is just the one that I happen to fill in this time. And then the kids, again, are responsible for as they come in. They're going to be filling in, okay, what's the next thing? And what's really cool about these boards, especially this one, is since the kids have identified with their initials or with their number or whatever, however the system is that you use, the next kid's responsibility is to check the one before and to make sure that it's correct. And then they have to practice those being nice skills and go up to those kids and say, hey, can you come here for a second? Let's talk about this. And so this is the kind of rich conversations that would happen in my class, which was really cool to watch them teach each other. And you can do this with the shape patterns. You can do it with growing patterns, repeating patterns. You can use number patterns. That what's next board is really cool. And so basically the way you would start it, just like we were saying before with those, the anchor charts, you do it for a couple of days and then you introduce the next one and then you cycle it in. So you do this one for a couple of days and then you do this one for a couple of days and then you do them both, right? One and then the next. And then you start to introduce the next thing. Now this one is really, really cool. Just like how many ways can I make a number? This one is going to be everyone comes in, hey, go unpack, and there's a sticky note waiting on your desk. And so on this one, the number of the day is 39. So you should see the kind of creative stuff the kids come up with this, because what they'll do is not only will they, and I just put some examples on here. You notice that the size of the columns and the boxes are just a little bit bigger than the sticky note. That was on purpose. So they could be at their desk and they could write, 39 is 1 plus 38, or if you're higher level, 3 times 13. Some of the kids got really creative because everyone had numbers in the class. They would put like Kevin plus Jane equals 39 because they put their numbers together and then got the number. So it's just really cool watching what they come up with. And again, I'm at morning meeting and I say, hey guys, let's take a look. And I don't look at all of them, but I grab a couple of them like, wow, hey, great job, 13, whoever that is, for saying this. This is really cool. I really like the way you did this. And again, you're just positively reinforcing what it is that you like that's going on in the class. So go to the next one real quick. One of the reasons why I'm glad I'm here is because I am teaching 100% virtual this year. And I know there's a lot of you out there that are struggling with, what is this? How do we do this, right? This is what I love. Okay. This is what I'm going back for my doctorate for. I want to be able to kind of step into that leadership to help people do this kind of thing. So one of the things, if you're using Zoom, in that bottom left, you're going to see on there's a box that I circled. It's called breakout rooms. Now, if you're using small groups in the physical face-to-face classroom, you can also do that in Zoom. Okay. And what's cool about that is, again, you give them their independent tasks and the kids are going to be doing what they're going to be doing when they're not with you. But when they're with you, you can set this up So you'll say, okay, let me pull the cappuccinos. In my class, everything's coffee. I've got the lattes, I got the mochas, I got the cappuccinos. And I'm like, cappuccinos, get ready, because here we go. And I just do click, 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 boom. And about 4 seconds later, we're in a small group and the rest of the kids are in the main room and they're working on whatever it is, right? And then I'm over here in a small group in a breakout room and I say, hey, let's do our small group. And everything that I would have been doing in the physical classroom, I try to, for the most part, duplicate in the virtual classroom, all right? You can also do this with this think, pair, share strategy. In the face-to-face, what it looks like, we're reading a book, and you know those moments where you're like, hey, someone tell me what's happened so far in the story. And you got 30 kids in your class, and one kid raises their hand. It's always the kid that raises their hand. And you don't get to hear from these other kids that never raise their hand. That's one kid being attended to their needs. But in the think, pair, share strategy, you say, hey guys, I'm going to ask a question about the story. Think about what's happened so far. So now they're on their own. They're thinking, they're getting inside their space, and they know exactly what's happening. And you set up your carpet or whatever all the kids are sitting, which I think is going to be a little bit stretched out now because of COVID. But you just think about where they're sitting, and then you tell them, all right, turn knees toward each other, okay? And then on this one, now they're going to talk. Okay, tell your partner what you thought about what's happened so far, all right? So then they start talking to each other. And then when it's time to share, it's the switcheroo. And after a couple of times, they realize you're going to do this to them. They're going to start paying attention to their partner, because they're not going to be sharing what they said to their partner. They're going to be sharing what their partner said. So then you say, hey, Johnny, go ahead and tell me what your partner said. And so then all of a sudden, oh man, I had to listen and I had to really be engaged with that conversation. Now, every child in your class during that pair part, you say, okay, child A, talk to child B. You have a minute? Okay, cool. Now B, talk to A. So all of a sudden, now of those 30 kids in your class, 15 kids are talking and the other 15 are listening. And then you say, child B, go. And now the other 15 are talking and the other 15 are listening. And then during the share, now you're reporting back what they were listening to. So this is a really cool strategy that you can do face-to-face, which you can duplicate over in the breakout rooms. You can automatically, if you notice on that button that says create breakout rooms, there are 3 choices. You can be assign, what does it say? Assign automatically, which is when you say, okay, that kid's a cappuccino, that kid's a cappuccino, that kid, or you can even have them preset. That's super complicated, and I really haven't even figured out how to do it, but apparently that can be done, where you can just, okay, that group, I want now. I usually just go click, 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 and sometimes, like if the last group, some of them didn't get in for whatever reason, that I can just quickly move in a group, right? So that's the assign a group, and the next one is really cool. You got 20 kids in the class, you say, okay, I know what 20 divided by 2 is. That's 10. So then you go set up 10 breakout rooms. You click that automatic button, and then boom, 5 seconds later, you got kids talking to each other about the thing. You set it up to have it come back after a certain time, or you hit the button and then you have them come back, and then boom, they are back in the main room. And that's when we do that share part, right? Dr. Kresk, if you could send it to the next slide. I've got a couple of minutes. I want to show you guys some really cool stuff. We've said the word Flipgrid a couple of times. So I actually wanted to show you that here in a second, but I don't want to lose where we're at in the slides. So let me just quickly kind of roll through some of these free things. Guys, as educators, we have so many things that are free to us on the internet. And I just want to talk about these 4 columns real quick. One of them is the differentiated content, which these are websites that all they have to do is set up an account, and the kids get on there. You can set stuff up for them to do, and it sends you data. And that's when you start pulling your small groups. No Red Ink is an awesome website that allows them to put in 5 or more interests in there. So let's say Star Wars, Marvel stuff, and then all of a sudden they get fed sentences where the kids are going to, Anakin went to the store to buy some chicken, right? And so whatever the activity is that you set up, maybe it's verbs or something, they have to identify the verbs. If they get it right, they move on. If they don't get it right, it feeds them 2 other sentences to try again, and then it gets them back on the path. And this is a really amazing website. I just got to tell you, it's free and it gets better every day. There is a paid version, of course, but this is like literally, if you're an elementary school teacher, you're never going to use anything past the free stuff. Splash Learn is a math program, same kind of thing. There's curriculum in there. It's differentiated. It's amazing. Khan Academy is free. Of course, there's paid versions of all these. That's how they make their money. But again, differentiated to your students. Guys, this is meeting their needs. That's the whole point. That video content, this category here is cool because you have, speaking of SEL, Class Dojo is kind of like Seesaw, where you're communicating with the students, the parents, and whatever. But when you click that link on this presentation, I've sent you to their videos. Oh my goodness. Their videos for SEL, hitting some of those social emotional needs and having those conversations about perseverance, about acceptance, about integrity. Those are all in there as videos, and you get to follow the life of a monster. In psychology, we call this vicarious modeling, right? So you get to follow the life of this little monster, not realizing this whole time you're really following your own life, but you're dealing with your own stuff as the monster is dealing with his stuff. Super, super cool. This guy, Mystery Doug, he runs another really expensive resource, but this part of it is all free. He answers questions of elementary school students. I'm running out of time, so I'm just going to quickly kind of breeze through the gamification. If you're not gamifying stuff in your class, you're missing a huge chunk of education. This website here, Prodigy, does math. GimKit has all kinds of cool stuff that the kids, you can do a main room game and the kids are interacting on their device and you're getting data. Same thing with Kahoot. If you're teaching social studies, even in the high school, iCivics is awesome. These are all linked. Click them. And I'm going to show you a couple of things real quick. Student response. Now, look, if you want a chance to really get your kids, especially if you are home right now teaching, I hear you guys are having these COVID classrooms where the kids are going home for 2 weeks. This is happening with my kindergartner. She's home right now because her class has COVID. This Flipgrid site is awesome. You put out a prompt and the kids have to go and do something. We had to do models for the solar system last week. And I've got kids with resources and kids that don't have resources. All right. So let me show you this real quick. Let me add the sound right there and check this out. Here's one of my kids.
So this is my solar system and this is the sun. This is Mercury.
So I'm not going to show you the whole thing, but she's actually presenting her project. Guys, how many times are we like, hey guys, let's present, and it takes 2 days for the kids to do it? With Flipgrid, you go, hey, go out in the hallway, go at home, go at this, whatever. And you give them a time limit of 1:30 to do their presentation. And then you just play those presentations on Flipgrid in front of the class. The kids love it. And they watch each other's. Make that a center. Let them do it. Check this out. This kid has got her.
This is my solar system. Here's the first one.
She's going to tell me all about it. There's a kid in here that made a museum level. I'm not messing around. Museum level model. Look at this. This is amazing.
Hey class, this is a model of my solar system. Sun in the middle.
So I can't show you all this right now because of time, but that was incredible. We did moon phases this week, right?
Side of the moon is facing the sun, so we can't see the moon because there's no light reflecting off the moon from the sun.
So just to kind of quickly tell you how I run my independent and whatever, I do a whole group lesson and then I give the kids activities on Google Slides. This is actually a Google slide that I shared with all the kids. And then they sent, they have their own copy because of our learning management system. You could just do a forced copy and give the kids if you don't have something like Schoology. And I think you guys, some of y'all have Canvas. If you don't have a management system like that, you can just force copy and give them copies and then have them send them back to you. But this was a drag and drop thing, and they had to put these exact spot around the planet and then get on Flipgrid, share their screen, and present it. Good stuff. And the last thing I wanted to show you is this. Guys, this is so cool, okay? This is GoFormative. The kids, I know a lot of you all use a Becca and you have a workbook that you work through. You can actually put some of those multiple choice things in here. This is a short read that the kids do on their own. And while they're doing it, I'm over here monitoring it as it happens. And I can see in live time what's going on. And then days like today, where I didn't even go to school today because I went and got the second coronavirus shot, they did this when I wasn't even there. It's amazing, right? And so look at this. This is the kind of thing I would do to pull a small group. I'd see right now that these kids, there's something wrong on question 5. Question 5 is really kicking their tail. So I want to go in there and find out what question 5 is. I'll go over here and I'll say, let's see what question 5 is. In the whole group conversation that I have is, oh, it looks like some of you guys are struggling with author's purpose. And so then I'll kind of talk about it if it's like more than 10 kids that missed it. But if it's only 5 like that, on the fly, I would make a small group just for that and immediately address it and give them that immediate feedback. So those are some things I just wanted to show you guys real quick. And I think that is time for me.
Mike, thank you so much. I'll tell you, a tremendous afternoon listening to all these professionals. I'm going to try to put back up real quick the contact information for all of our presenters. Dr. Bonk, Dr. Callahan, Dr. Dracinos, Dr. Fuge, and Mike Lewis. They're the Regent email address, and that's Ivy's everychildwhole.com email address. First, let me just say thank you so much to the panelists. Really just being able to connect the research piece, the theory, to the practicality of what can I do in my classroom, and then also working in the virtual side, not only just because of COVID, but what Mike was talking about, just to save time in the classroom, to have kids do that, as a supplementary outside of the classroom activity. I thought was great. That was fantastic. Second, I want to thank all of you that joined us today. And definitely, I think we all come away with a call to action on what we can do to meet the needs of our kids and do a good job. And by the way, I didn't really see the Q&A questions that came up were answered as we were going through by the panelists. So panelists, I want to thank you for that. I didn't see any at that time. I'll check real quick, see if we have any other Q&A that have come up. I see Tyler's answered a question. Meantime, if anybody has anything else, feel free to reach out to any of the panelists or myself. My name is Kurt Kressig. I'm Dean of the School of Education. And as we close, we only have a couple more minutes, but it's been a pleasurable afternoon. Any last minute comments from any panelists?
Hey, Kurt, can you try one more time to put on everyone's contact information? Sure. I don't think that showed up on the screen, because I'd love for them to be able to reach out and continue the conversation if needed.
You got it. Hang on one second.
And ladies and gentlemen, I know several of you have asked, will you be getting this information? I will do my best to get it to each one of your inboxes, the recording this afternoon and also the presentation. I will either be able to send that to you directly or to your leader, who then can share it with you. So just wanted to be sure that you know that we definitely plan to get this out to you.
All right, I'm going to share my screen. All right, Tyler, I think everybody can see that now.
Yep. Thank you.
You got it. Take a few more minutes. Again, you're going to get that. But Tyler, in about 30 seconds, if you don't mind, I can close this in prayer. I don't see. And by the way, for all the participants, I appreciate the chat that was going on. A lot of sharing of information, a lot of positive thoughts about what you're doing in your classroom. A lot of positive actions that I read that you're doing right now to meet the needs of students. So I appreciate that. It's exciting to see that when you get a group of educators together that are making a difference in the lives of children, but also our communities. So I thank you for that.
Yeah, Kurt, real quick, I just want to second that as well. Being in the school myself as a principal, I know how hard everyone has had to work with COVID, and how at times it's been very frustrating, very difficult, but you guys have kept up the good fight and doing a lot for the kingdom. So thank you all for the tireless work and effort that you do. I'm so glad we could get together as a group and encourage one another.
Absolutely. Well said. Again, thank you very much to Dr. Bonk, Dr. Callahan, Dr. Dracinos, Dr. Fuge, and Mike Lewis. Exciting stuff. And folks, if you join me, let me go ahead and close this in prayer. It's been a terrific afternoon. Father, thank you for our dedicated teachers. Thank you for their inspiration in our lives, for their knowledge and skills, for their commitment to children of all ages. We ask that you bless their work, and may all teachers' lives be enriched. In the name of Jesus, we pray. Amen. Folks, thank you so much for joining us today. I wish you the best and success in the coming spring, and God bless.